Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be the first team in this debate to do three things. One, we're going to give you thorough analysis of who these people are who actually live in gated communities and why these people are uniquely likely to actually leave the countries in which they live and move out of those countries. Secondly, we're going to tell you that even if these people don't leave, as what the government likes to believe, why that process of actually staying but moving out of gated communities is going to lead to decreased investment in health, education, and the security of the nation at large. And thirdly, we're going to actually look at the transition process, because what you're doing is actually abolishing these gated communities, kicking these people out of these gated communities, and what hasn't been analysed is how these people within those gated communities will react and respond to this policy that's being introduced. Because when you have a situation like the Westgate Mall massacre that we had in Kenya recently, when you have situations like what we have in South Africa and other countries, where there's high rates of rape and murder and so on, what you need is high levels of security and the perception of security to attract the best people and to have that human investment. Firstly, who actually lives in these gated communities? These are people who are incredibly security conscious. That's why they choose to live in gated communities, why they hire guards, why they choose that over other alternatives. And so when they're making a decision about where to live, they're going to apply that same metric in the future that they applied in the past. And so they are going to be security conscious. And if you can't provide the level of security outside of these gated communities, they're going to look for security elsewhere. They're also incredibly wealthy, so they have the capacity and means to actually fund a movement from one country to another. Thirdly, the fact is they're already being moved under your model. They're already going out of these gated communities into other suburbs already. So it's not a choice between not moving and moving. It's a choice between moving or moving, ladies and gentlemen. We think that's another reason why they're more likely to leave. But furthermore, often these people are actually sent there by their businesses for businesses who have other offices around the world, and it's quite easy to move them from one place to another. And we think that that leads to massive consequences, such as decreased business investment, such as movement in human capital. And the point is, we're already seeing this at the moment. About a third of South African doctors already moved to Australia to work because they get higher incomes and because it's safer. What you're doing under your model is you're moving one of the last things that actually keeps them there. That's the perception of security. That's hugely damaging, and it just increases brain drain. What did we hear in response? OG said, well, they have family. Many relatives have already moved. They said there's capital investment. You can often invest remotely. They said, what about expats? Well, we say expats may stay. There might be some people, but those people won't be the best people for the job in many cases. And so even if numerically the same people stay, they won't be often your first choice of person to live in that country. We say that at a best case scenario under your model, there'll be slightly less people, but there'll still be less people who are staying there. We say that that actually leads to a greater perception of inequality, because then you actually can't see those wealthier people in that community. It's a choice between a rich country and a poor country, rather than actually having wealthy and poor people in the same place. Second question, even if there is no change in the number of people, why this will lead to decreased investment in health, education and security, all the things they want to talk about. Because what they assumed is that where there's government, they assumed throughout all their lobbying arguments that there's a lack of government will to improve health and education and security. No one else is what that is. What we say is the main reason why the government doesn't have a functioning security sewage system and security system is because they don't have the money to be able to do that system. It's not a case of lack of political will. It's not lobbying which will change it. A few points on this. Firstly, we say that what gated communities do is they solve a collective action problem, because when wealthy individuals are deciding whether or not they should invest, they weigh up the amount that they're going to invest, whether by themselves or through taxation, with the return that they get. And for all your arguments to hold, necessarily, in order for poor people to benefit, what you're essentially saying is that poor people are getting less of a return on their investment in their own health, education and security. So you're going to have wealthy people who aren't as willing to invest in this if they're not getting the same benefit. By having lots of wealthy people who have the same mindset and who want to benefit in the same way, you can pool those resources, make the same decision, overcome that collective action problem. But furthermore, they completely ignore the fact that often these people who have a business background, who are focused on that, don't actually trust the government in terms of misallocation of resources, inefficiency, and widespread corruption, which is accepted to exist in many, many developing countries. So they're always going to prioritize their personal private investment over giving money to the government. Thirdly, what we say is that in order to actually take risks, which is important for development and business investment, what you need is the perception of safety and security, and that's undermined by your model. But fourthly, what they also ignore is the spillover effect from that security. That if you want high levels of security in gated communities, what you're going to do is you're going to train up people. You're going to teach them how to actually carry out their jobs well, because that level of services is going to be more highly demanded. And what we say is that when you have that greater know-how within those gated communities, that high level of training, it's going to be easier to transform those skills into other institutions, and which is important to the stability and security of that country. Third point, why forced integration is bad. What we say is that what you have completely ignored is the transition process. Because when you actually kick people out, they're not just going to go like without a fight. These people are going to backlash against the government and against these people who are kicking them out. What that means is that that's going to have damaging effects for attracting further investment into the country. Because you need these people as allies. These are people who are more likely to travel, more likely to tell their friends to come to the country. And what we say is that you need that additional human capital. What you don't have is when you make them an enemy, because you decrease the levels of investments and the taxation that they pay in that model back.
Natasha told you that where there are low labour costs and natural resources, people are always going to move. If those people are security conscious, as you say, and we now have more taxes who've not been absorbed in the microeconomies, and you're not taking all of the best people from the police force into non-private security services, are those security services going to improve for the majority of people in the country, rather than just entrenching the smaller elites?
No, the problem is, as I said, the investment that these wealthy individuals place in security just isn't going to happen because they're not getting the corresponding benefit of that. In order to have that investment, you need to actually get an adequate return of that. What other points did we have from the government? We said that there's no exposure and therefore you don't have sympathy. I told you that it leads to greater backlash, not sympathy. These people are going to resent being kicked out. You're creating us and them first mentality through the introduction of your policy. They'll say there's less incentive to lobby. But we had no analysis of why lobbying is actually the best way to have change. We say in many ways private investment is. But moreover, the problem isn't that governments lack will, it's that they don't have the money to roll out the billions and billions in terms of having sewage systems that actually work. They told us that they need to contribute in a meaningful way. We say that paying huge amounts of taxes is a meaningful contribution. They told us the rich will give more and more exposure. Well, not if they're subjected to greater crime, and that's already so much being conceded. They told us about multinational change. We said they already exist in gated communities, and so they're more likely to expand to other communities, but moreover, they're paying taxes, which doesn't happen under your model. What did we hear from employers? We heard that there's high income disparity. That's worse if you don't get the same taxes. They said that you need the rich on side, not if you get kicked out. But furthermore, a lot of their analysis just assumes that poor people are dumb. Poor people know inequality exists, whether or not they're in gated communities or not. And furthermore, it's like a slap in the face to have people who are consuming things that aren't necessary out your front door. We say the happiness of these poorer people is actually improved without slapping wealth in their face. Ladies and gentlemen, rich people will leave for all these reasons I analysed. But even if they don't leave, their model decreases investments in health, education, and investment in security, which is necessary for development. Very proud to oppose.